As I mentioned earlier on, I was in Dublin for a meeting of the Presbyterian, the Synod of Munster, and its main purpose was to license Gavin Byrne to candidate for the Unitarian Church in Dublin. So I decided I would travel into Dublin from the suburb of Blackrock on the bus. And I was travelling early yesterday morning on the bus into Dublin City for the meeting. And at Donnybrook, when the bus stopped at a bus stop, a young woman came running around a corner, waving frantically at the bus driver, waving frantically with one hand and holding a piece of toast in the other hand. It was, I imagine, her breakfast. The driver, which is typical of Dublin bus drivers, I have to say, held the bus and waited until she scrambled onto the bus, breathlessly swiped her travel card, then smiling in my direction as I eyed her toast, and she said, "This is my breakfast." So she was determined she was not going to work without her breakfast. And I thought, perfect. Yet many would think, obviously, there are many things wrong there. She got up late, and it was downhill from all there. I presume she might have dropped the coffee on the way, but held on to the toast. But I just love the idea of somebody running out a door with their toast held in their hand, determined they were still going to have their breakfast. And I think to some extent, we all live lives with a certain level of disorganization and even last-minute panic. A little bit of chaos at times, lack of planning are part of what we are. Perfection, it is said, is the enemy of the good. And it's generally believed that might have been said by Voltaire, although others suggest it may have been Mark Twain. Now, what Mark Twain did say was that continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. And he believed in the 70-30 rule. Rather than waiting to try and get 100% right, if you manage 70% right, that will do fine. And seeking perfection in the secular world, in my opinion, can slow progress and limit outcome. Now, I'm not suggesting that people only strive for second best. But I like the Irish idea of saying, sure, it's grand, it'll do, leave it. And it suits me grand. But what does it mean in the spiritual sense of things, in religious life, to be always striving for perfection? The Bible makes a more determined line than I would. As it says in Matthew 5:48, "Be perfect as your Father is in heaven." Be perfect as your Father is in heaven. And I thought to myself when I read that, come on, Matt, give us a break. First of all, he's God. And second, he's in heaven. Now, if you're in heaven, surely you're perfect anyway. The fact that you got there. Now, he started from a better situation than I did. He created the whole thing. So his sense of perfection might be very different from my sense of perfection. So I thought, Matt, try and go back and rephrase that. Or maybe to some extent, maybe because we are made in God's image, at least that's what we believe, is God's imperfections reflected in all of us. That's why sometimes I like aspects of the Jewish tradition, where one rabbi said he prayed all night to God because there were a couple of things he felt God had got wrong. And he prayed all night. And someone said to him, did God respond? And he said, well, I think he did. As I was just about to fall asleep in the early hours of the morning, I heard an apology ringing in my ear. There is no flawless human beings. There is no flawless system. And those who suggest that there is perfect government and a perfect system, in my opinion, are delusional. And those who try to create a perfect society, in my opinion, are dangerous. Utopian visions lead, as we see them always, lead to totalitarian, violent society. Orwell covered that very, very well in his book, Animal Farm. The pursuit of perfection can destroy reality because it doesn't relate to reality. In all the systems we build and in our own personal life and our own capacity as human beings. We see it in those who preach prosperity theology. Prosperity theology. God will make you rich. Those who are saved will automatically become rich. I saw this myself in places like Brazil and in Central America. And people who remained poor believed themselves sinners because God did not shine his prosperous light on them. And then we see it in what is happening in Iran with the perfect Islamic State and the brutality against those who oppose them. Or even in a secular belief or ideology like Marxism, trying to create a perfect society that never happens. It is reasonable to argue. It is reasonable to argue from all those perspectives that society can be based on values, whether they are religious, secular, socialist, capitalist, or whatever. But it is not reasonable to assume there will be a perfect outcome and that everybody should subscribe to that. And it's a problem with our own sense of governance. That today we are obsessed, absolutely obsessed, that all our politicians and those who govern us should live up to some sort of perfect image of what we imagine they should be. I was reading recently by Matthew Said, writing in the Sunday Times, and he said, every time he's in the green room of a television studio, politicians are frantically on their phones, trying to see what the latest TikTok message that went out about them was, to make sure they would counter it with some perfect solution. And he felt they were being locked into a system that just wasn't true. Those we see as having obvious, or what we would have called obvious, imperfections. In the past, such things as physical or intellectual. Sometimes we used to shy away in days gone by, such people were not in the public domain. Now, thankfully, we live in a more enlightened world, where as well as having the Olympics, we have the Special Olympics, we have the Paralympics, so that everybody can engage with a sense that we are not perfect human beings. There is space for us all to engage. And on that I want to mention a particular friend of mine, Philip Raynadair. Philip, who is married to his husband Stephen, and Stephen, many of you will know, is minister in Kalinchy non-subscribing Presbyterian Church. 2 weeks ago, myself and Isabel and Trevor were delighted to be invited to a reception in Lisburn Civic Centre, where Philip received the King's Medal for his project Live Life. What is Live Life, you ask? It's a program to help children with special needs, intellectual or physical, particularly intellectual, to have some meaning in their lives. What we would have seen in years gone by as imperfections, as we parked them separately from ourselves. Yet here we were in the Civic Centre in Lisbon, celebrating them, and Philip and them receiving the King's Medal. The King's Medal. I cannot describe the joy it was to be there, and the absolute joy when each one of those people, those children, went up to receive their certificate from the Lord Lieutenant. It was deeply, deeply moving. And I thought, what a genius our young friend Philip is to create this meaningful space in their lives where happiness could not only be enjoyed by them, but by families who believed they had somebody imperfect in the family and now could see a whole human being. You know, for me, that is what makes our world so wonderful. That sense of inclusion that comes from pure love. And may the divine that shaped all of us in all of our imperfections, may the divine bless us and grant his wisdom and bless us to enjoy our absolutely wonderful imperfections. Amen.